I got a pretty cool request today. A Golick and Wingo were doing, of course, the mornings on ESPN Radio. They did a mock draft for their show, and everybody loves mock drafts, right? Well, they did their mock draft, and they asked either the NFL Nation reporters or their radio affiliates in the respective markets to come on the show and make their picks for that respective team. No trades were allowed, and candidly, I made the pick this morning, but they needed the pick yesterday so they could get the profile and all that stuff, the vignette ready and everything. But so they send me the list of who had been picked, and so I had to make my decision. And Kenneth Murray had come off the board already, and picking one spot before the Saints, the Patriots writer, I think it was Mike Reese who made the pick, selected Patrick Queen. So the two inside linebackers, the single greatest position of need for the Saints in this draft, inside linebacker. The two that roundly everyone agrees have a first-round draft grade were off the board. So I had a decision to make. Do I go with a more practical position? Do I go with a cornerback? Christian Fulton was still on the board. Do I go with an edge rusher? Caleb Von Chasson was still on the board. Do I go outside of the LSU bubble and pick best available based on whoever else was on the board? Or do I take Jordan Love? And if you didn't listen to the segment, I'll spoil it for you. I took Jordan Love. And I surprised myself in doing this because I was not and have not been, up until this point, super sold on the idea of Jordan Love as a first rounder, or certainly Jordan Love to New Orleans. And that has popped up in several mock drafts. One thing, first of all, that hit me with this was it's kind of difficult. Like, when it's one thing to say what you would do in a situation. It's another when you actually have to make the pick. Like, I'm sitting here today saying, the Saints will take Murray or Queen, whoever's on the board. What if you're sitting there on draft day, if you're the Saints, and you want one of those linebackers, and what happened to me in this mock exercise happens on Thursday, and the Patriots take Patrick Queen, and so now you got 10 minutes for real to decide who you're going to take, who you're going to pay millions of dollars to, and knowing your job and your reputation and your franchise is on the line. It's tough. Like, the stress goes up. So do you stay married to your board and take the guy remaining that you have as the highest graded prospect? But I went with Jordan Love ultimately for this reason. Cornerback and wide receiver, I think, are positions where the Saints need help. This is a deep draft for both of those positions. The Saints can meet needs at those positions later in the draft and get a really good player. For example, if the Saints are picking in round 3, there's a really good chance Amik Robertson's on the board. We've talked about Amik. He was on the show last week. He was an all-conference defensive back from Louisiana Tech. He wowed people throughout this pre-draft process, and he is going to be a top 100 pick in the draft. The Saints could draft Amik Robertson, very likely could draft Amik Robertson in round 3, and I'd be completely content with that. That's a guy who could potentially be a starter for you, maybe not year 1, but in year 2, after you have to give Marshawn Lattimore a giant contract. Cool. You can offset that by having your other starter on a rookie deal, and you could part ways with Janoris Jenkins if it comes to that, theoretically, or in time, if it's a year or 2 years, whatever it may be. You've got another potential stud on a rookie contract. You could go receiver. And many have said this is the deepest receiver draft in 3 decades. And the Saints theoretically could, Mike Detillier, who we spoke with last week, in his mock draft, has the Saints taking Lynn Bowden of Kentucky in round 3. Dynamic playmaker who left his spot at receiver to play quarterback at Kentucky when their starter got hurt this year. Point is, you've got tons of value at cornerback and receiver later in this draft, to where you can address those positions after round 1. It is my opinion that at quarterback, there is a massive drop-off after Jordan Love. You know how it's going to go at the top with Burrow, and then whatever order Tua and Justin Herbert are going to come off the board next, likely to Miami and the Chargers. Okay. However that goes, we'll find out on Thursday. Jordan Love is sort of the consensus next guy on the board. But after that, you have a massive drop-off to guys like Jacob Eason, Jalen Hurts, Jake Fromm. Are you content saying, all right, you're going to take a quarterback in this draft, taking one of those guys? Like, would you rather have the boom potential of Jordan Love after Drew Brees retires, or the meh of a Jake Fromm, but have a really nice cornerback in round one? For me, that's easy. I think the bones of this organization are really good. The Saints structurally have drafted very well over the last 3 years. And they have hit on some major prospects. Marshawn Lattimore, Alvin Kamara, Ryan Ramczyk. I mean, you have done exceptionally well in the draft. Michael Thomas, of course, who you just paid a boatload of cash. Eric McCoy started every game as a rookie. The Saints have drafted exceptionally well, and the bones of this organization are good. To whereby if Drew Brees leaves, I think you're still a winning franchise. Drew Brees a year ago missed 5 games. You won all 5 games with Teddy Bridgewater at the helm. But you're never going to be a championship franchise without a championship quarterback. And here you have an opportunity to potentially get that guy and give him the luxury of doing what Patrick Mahomes did, of doing what Aaron Rodgers did, of doing what Tom Brady did, which is sitting and watching a great player at his craft. That's invaluable. Think about whatever profession you're in. Whatever you do professionally, didn't you gather tidbits from watching people early in your career, emulating them, whatever it is you want to do? If you're an attorney, didn't you go sit at trials and watch really good trial attorneys do their job? If you're a doctor, like, you had to go through a residency program. You had to go watch doctors who are really good at what they do, watch how they do what they do, and extract behaviors from them. Same for me. There's certainly people who I watched early in my career and still do to this day, who I always try to take little tidbits from. What better opportunity for a guy like Jordan Love than to come to New Orleans and sit and watch the greatest who's ever done it for a year? I'm for it. Wouldn't that make the post-Breeze transition easier? Sean Payton's already said he's going to have 3 quarterbacks on the roster: Drew Brees, Taysom Hill, and someone else. If it's a veteran in free agency or if it's a rookie in the draft, you're going to have a 3rd quarterback on the roster. Why not this guy? I just keep going back to thinking about Patrick Mahomes. In 2017, Sean Payton swears he was taking Patrick Mahomes 11 overall. And the Chiefs traded up to 10. They selected Mahomes. The Saints at 11 took Marshawn Lattimore. How different is the Saints franchise today had they selected Patrick Mahomes then? How different is the entire NFL? What if Jordan Love is that next? I don't want to say Patrick Mahomes. I don't want to say if he's going to win an MVP. But what if he's the guy with all of the measurables? The big 6'3" frame, the rocket arm, the mobility, the desire, all of that stuff, the athleticism. What if that's the ball of clay that you could draft and let Drew Brees and Sean Payton start to mold this year and then let him grow in that role? I'd really hate to look back in 2, 3, 5 years at that guy becoming a dominant starter in the NFL and think, could have had him, but went for a receiver in a deep receiver draft. So I like the idea of Jordan Love. I've talked myself into it. I've talked myself into some things that are personally against my noted truths I have said ride the Drew Brees wagon until the wheels fall off. Win now. Use every asset you have to win now and don't think about the future. And now I'm going against that with Jordan Love. I've said devalue running backs, and now I'm arguing to trade for Leonard Fournette, but that is more of a win now thing. The desperation of this moment of trying to win a Super Bowl this year has led me to some very uncomfortable realities. But I really am comfortable with the idea of drafting Jordan Love 24 overall if he's on the board.